They say you can tell a man's fortune by his shoes, but all you'd see on Mark Davis that July afternoon was a pair of dusty boots, cracked at the heels, trailing the California heat behind every step. The racetrack shimmered beneath the sun, a patchwork of dirt and hope, laughter and despair, the air alive with the scent of hay and something sharper, like someone else's luck, burning just out of reach. Mark pulled up in a pickup that looked as tired as he did, rust flaking off the hood in jagged patches, the engine groaning as if it were begging for retirement. He eased open the door, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward him, a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled mockery rolling across the lot. At the gate, a group of trainers lounged in the shade, shirts unbuttoned, sunglasses low on their noses, whispering in low, amused voices. He ignored them, kept his head down, and walked straight toward the auction pen. It was a cruel kind of theater, watching the horses parade by, each one appraised and dismissed in seconds by people who thought they could measure heart with a glance. Mark's gaze lingered on a thin brown gelding standing at the far end, his coat dull, ribs casting faint shadows, a jagged scar running down his left flank. The animal looked back at him, eyes wary but not yet broken. "Who's bidding on that mess?" someone snorted from behind the rail. "He's wasting his last dime. Look at those boots, man. Probably lives in his truck." Mark fished a wrinkled envelope from his jacket, counting out every last dollar, as if the act itself was an act of hope. The auctioneer barely paused. "Lot 32, Dusty. We'll start at 500. No takers. 350. 200? A round of laughter. A woman near the front covered her mouth, eyes sparkling. 150 cash, Mark said quietly. The auctioneer blinked. "Sold. 150, to the gentleman in the hat." A ripple of disbelief. Mark signed the bill of sale and pressed his palm to Dusty's trembling neck, whispering words that belonged to a softer world. All around him the crowd swelled with noise. "He'll be lucky if the horse lasts a week. Old guy's gonna run out of cash and end up sleeping in the barn. Maybe he's got a secret. Maybe he's just crazy." The next hour was a blur of forms and handshakes. Mark led Dusty past the stable row, heads turning as they passed. Someone spat on the ground in front of him. He stepped over it, eyes fixed ahead. The stables were noisy with the chaos of race day. Boots thudding on planks, tack jangling, the metallic scent of sweat and nervous anticipation. Mark found a stall at the end, away from the worst of the jibes, and started to work. He brushed Dusty's coat, slow strokes, steady as sunrise. He murmured things only the horse could hear, promises and apologies, hands gentle as a lullaby. Dusty flinched at the clang of a bucket, eyes rolling white, and Mark just kept brushing, humming under his breath. Outside, the laughter hadn't faded. At the betting windows, the regulars laid their money down, making a show of their cynicism. "Put me down for 50 against the old man. Easiest money I'll make all year." Kids leaned over the fence, giggling. "You really think he can win anything with that skeleton?" Mark knelt to check Dusty's shoes, fingers working at bent nails, sweat running down the side of his face. In his mind, the noise faded. He remembered things he never said out loud, other tracks, other horses, mornings that began before dawn and ended long after midnight, before he walked away from all of it. But this wasn't about proving something to anyone in the crowd. It was about Dusty, and about second chances, and maybe about himself, too. A gust of wind rattled the tin roof, setting the stable cats to yowling. Mark looked up and saw one of the trainers, a thick-set man with arms like hams, blocking the doorway. "Hey, old-timer, heard you bought a lemon. What are you, a charity case? or just looking for a new bedroll? Mark straightened slowly, wiped his hands on his jeans. Just looking for a little quiet, he said. The man grunted, shrugged, and moved on. By sunset, the lot was nearly empty. Only the hardcore gamblers and late workers remained, the air thick with exhaustion and the promise of tomorrow's races. Mark fed Dusty half an apple, watched him chew, the horse's lips soft and uncertain. When the sky turned pink over the track, Mark closed the stall, leaned against the wall, and let his eyes drift shut for a moment. He heard the others as he drifted in and out of sleep. You see him? The old guy, yeah, the one with the ragged pickup. Swears he's gonna enter that nag in Saturday's race. No way. He'll get laughed out the gate. Mark didn't mind. Let them laugh. Let them bet against him. He'd been laughed at before. He'd been down before. But he knew something they didn't. The look in Dusty's eyes, the way his ears flicked forward, the way he trembled but didn't bolt. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't even about winning. Not yet. It was about believing that one battered horse and one tired man might still have something left to show the world, even if the world was too busy laughing to notice. The lights from the track flickered on, casting long shadows through the stalls. Mark's voice was low as he spoke, just for Dusty and himself. We'll show them, won't we? The night settled in. Somewhere outside, the crowd's laughter faded, replaced by the quiet breathing of horses and the restless hush of dreams waiting to run. Race day dawned with a sky the color of cold steel, the faintest promise of rain on the horizon. At the edge of the track, Mark was already awake, rolling out of the battered pickup before the sun had cracked the eastern hills. He stretched his back, feeling every vertebra protest, then made his way to the stables with an apple in his pocket, and hope balanced precariously in his chest. Inside the barn, Dusty stood alert, nostrils flaring as Mark entered. You ready for this? Mark murmured, running his hand along the horse's scarred flank. The old gelding shifted, stomping the ground, his eyes wide but eager, as if he understood that today was different from all the days before. The racetrack buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Workers and owners moved with urgent purpose, boots thumping on packed dirt, the air thick with the scent of liniment, coffee, and anticipation. Mark led Dusty out, guiding him carefully past rows of sleek, muscled horses, their coats shining under the harsh overhead lights. The difference was obvious, and nobody let Mark forget it. Hey, look at him! Brought that scarecrow out for a real race? A wave of laughter rippled through the gathering crowd. Mark kept his head down, focusing on Dusty, ignoring the sharp-edged words flung his way. Some of the other owners, dressed in crisp polos and gold watches, leaned in, grinning like wolves. Maybe we should all save money. Stop feeding our horses. Works for him. At the registration tent, the clerk hesitated, then scribbled Mark's name on the roster, her eyes flicking between him and Dusty with thinly veiled skepticism. You're really running him? In the third race? You sure about that, mister? Mark just nodded, steady as a stone. We're sure. He led Dusty toward the starting gate, feeling the knot in his stomach twist tighter with every step. The other horses, fierce, restless, powerful, stomped and snorted, their jockeys adjusting brightly colored silks. Dusty's ears flicked, his muscles tense beneath Mark's hand. The crowd pressed up against the rail, tickets and dollar bills fluttering like confetti. Some people pointed, others whispered. A familiar voice carried across the track. I'll take 100 to 1 that nag comes in dead last. Another man barked a laugh. You're being generous, Ray. The betting windows were alive with shouts. All in against the old guy. No way he even finishes. A few soft-hearted onlookers frowned, but nobody spoke up for Mark. Not yet. When the moment came, Mark stepped aside to let the jockey, a wiry kid named Julio, mount up. Julio looked nervous, glancing down at Dusty's skinny frame, then up at Mark. "You sure about this? He looks like he hasn't seen a real race in years." "He'll run for you," Mark replied, voice calm. "Just give him his head. Don't fight him at the break." Julio hesitated, then nodded, gripping the reins tight. Dusty sidestepped, tense but ready. The starting bell clanged, echoing off the metal bleachers. The gates snapped open with a crash. Horses leaped forward in a thunder of hooves. Dusty stumbled coming out, nearly going to his knees, and for a split second, Mark's heart stopped in his chest. The crowd roared with laughter. "That's it! He's done!" But Dusty found his feet, surging forward, long legs stretching, the wind catching in his mane. The field thundered around him, mud flying, riders shouting. Dusty clung to the outside, ears pinned, muscles working desperately. Julio leaned low over Dusty's neck, whispering encouragement. "Come on, boy! Come on!" At the halfway mark, Dusty was trailing far behind, the leaders pulling away. The other owners exchanged smug glances, already counting their winnings. But in the home stretch, something changed. Dusty's stride lengthened, his eyes fixed on the horse ahead. He surged forward, finding another gear, one nobody in the stands expected. One by one, Dusty passed the tired sprinters, inching closer with every stride. The crowd's tone shifted from jeering to stunned disbelief. "Look at that! He's moving!" "No way! Is he actually catching up?" In the final furlong, Dusty pulled alongside the favorite, a muscular bay with a glinting bridle. The two horses thundered neck and neck, manes flying, jockeys urging them on. With one final burst, Dusty stretched his nose ahead. Just as they crossed the finish line, the crowd fell silent. Then, as the numbers went up on the board, second place for Dusty, shouts and gasps erupted. "He came in second. How is that possible?" Mark watched, a tight smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. Dusty stood in the paddock, sides heaving, head held high. Julio jumped down, face flushed with excitement. "I thought he was done for. Then he just kept coming." Reporters rushed to the rail, firing off questions. "Who's the owner? What's the story with this horse? Where did you find him?" Mark shrugged off the attention, more interested in Dusty's steady breathing and the light in his eyes. The ridicule had turned to curiosity, and a few of the onlookers who'd sneered that morning now shook their heads, amazed. At the payout window, those who'd bet against Mark grumbled as their winnings shrank. A young boy ran up, tugging Mark's sleeve. "Mister, was that really your horse? He was awesome." Mark knelt down, ruffling the boy's hair. "He sure was, kid. Sometimes the best horses just need a chance." The trainers from earlier eyed Mark warily now, their laughter gone. One of them, a grizzled veteran, approached. "That horse. He got more in him than he looks. You got lucky, old man." Mark smiled, but his eyes were serious. Luck's only part of it. As the sun dipped behind the grandstand, Mark led Dusty back to the barn, the horse walking tall, no longer just another ragged outcast. For the first time since he'd set foot on that track, the crowd didn't laugh as he passed. They watched, and some even tipped their hats. That night, as he brushed Dusty down and fed him an extra apple, Mark let himself hope. Maybe the world was starting to see what he'd seen all along. Maybe, just maybe, their story was only getting started. Morning came quietly at the California track. The sky still bruised with lingering shadows as Mark rose before dawn. The world was silent except for the soft nickering of horses and the distant clatter of someone hosing down the walk. In that pale in-between light, Mark moved through the stables with practiced calm, a thermos of black coffee warming his hands, the familiar ache of old bones making every step a reminder of days long gone. Dusty greeted him with a soft whinny, the thin brown gelding already looking brighter, eyes clearer, posture stronger after yesterday's race. Mark smiled, slipping the horse a sliver of apple and rubbing his forehead in slow circles. "You did good, buddy. Better than good. But we're not done yet." He set to work brushing Dusty's coat, slow and rhythmic, using the faded curry comb he'd kept for years. With each stroke, Dusty leaned in, relaxing under his touch, tension fading from his shoulders. The barn was still empty, but for a few early workers, a world away from the noisy, jeering crowd and the weight of their expectations. Here there was just patience, trust, and the steady heartbeat of hope. After a while, Mark heard the soft scrape of boots behind him. He turned to find Sarah, the youngest stable hand, hovering by the open stall door, her hands jammed into her sweatshirt pockets, eyes darting everywhere but his. "Morning, Sarah," Mark greeted her, voice gentle. He'd noticed her before, small, always moving fast, rarely talking, but never missing a beat with the horses. She seemed to melt into the background, unremarkable to most, but Mark could tell she watched everything. "Hi," Sarah replied, voice barely above a whisper. "You need any help?" Mark considered for a moment, then nodded. "Sure. You ever fed a nervous horse before?" She hesitated, then edged closer. "A couple times. The big ones don't like me much. I'm not really good with them yet." He handed her an apple slice. Horses aren't much different from people. Most of them are just waiting for someone to be kind. Sarah took the apple, offering it in her palm. Dusty sniffed, then ate it, his lips tickling her hand. She grinned, her whole face changing in the soft morning light. "See," Mark said, "he trusts you already." They worked together in quiet harmony, Mark showing her how to brush Dusty's coat in small circles, how to check for sore spots, how to whisper soft encouragement even when the horse flinched at faraway sounds. Mark's hands were steady, his words patient, never rushed. For Sarah, used to being shouted at or brushed aside by the older trainers, it was a new experience, someone believing she could do something right. Between lessons, Sarah opened up. "How'd you know Dusty would race so good yesterday?" she asked, curiosity shining through. Mark paused, weighing his answer. "It's not about the odds, or how a horse looks standing in the pen. Sometimes you just know. You see it in their eyes. They want to run. They just need someone to believe they can." Sarah nodded slowly, the words sinking in. As the sun crept higher, the barn filled with the sounds of a new day. Other workers came in, busying themselves with mucking stalls, stacking hay, gossiping in low voices. Sarah seemed to shrink again, her confidence evaporating beneath their sharp glances. One of the older hands, a lanky guy named Rick, called out as he passed. "Careful, Sarah. Hang around the loser stable too long. You'll start catching bad luck." A few snickers followed, but Mark shot Rick a look that made him think twice about saying more. Sarah fidgeted, embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" Mark shook his head. "Let them talk. Most folks are afraid of looking foolish, so they hide behind laughter. But you're learning, not hiding. That matters." She smiled, reassured, and kept working. As the days passed, a quiet routine settled in. Mark and Sarah tended to Dusty every morning, brushing and feeding, leading him around the track before the sun had fully risen. Mark taught Sarah how to read Dusty's moods, how to calm him when thunder cracked in the distance, how to listen for the subtle signs of a horse that needed rest, not more work. In those early hours, Mark shared bits of wisdom he'd gathered over a lifetime. How to treat saddle sores with homemade balm. How to braid a forelock to keep flies away. How to look for the smallest improvements. A shinier coat, a steadier step, a softer eye. Dusty began to change. His coat grew glossy, muscles filling out as the weeks rolled by. The horse who once cowered at every loud noise now lifted his head proudly, ears pricked, eager for each morning's run. Sarah found her own confidence growing in step with Dusty's transformation. Where she'd once flinched from criticism, she now met challenges with quiet resolve. One morning, as they led Dusty around the track, Sarah spoke up. You think people like us ever really belong here? All the others, they've got money, family, and the business. Everything handed to them." Mark took a long breath, then looked her square in the eyes. "This place needs people who care more about the horse than the purse. Most folks never learn that. You belong here because you give a damn, same as me." Sarah smiled, standing a little taller. Word started to spread about Dusty's improvement. People stopped by the barn, some out of curiosity, some just to see if the rumors were true. A few even offered Mark advice, thinly disguised as warnings. "Don't get your hopes up. A horse like that's got limits. Don't get too attached, or you'll end up disappointed." Mark listened, nodded, but kept to himself. He knew what mattered wasn't what others believed. It was the quiet work done in the dark, the slow building of trust and strength, the silent partnership between outcasts who refused to quit. And in the hush of the early morning, as the sun spilled gold over the empty track and Dusty tossed his head with pride, Mark felt something shift. Maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to belong. Not because they fit in, but because they refused to give up. By late summer, the whispers had grown louder, winding through the California racetrack like smoke. Every morning Mark arrived early, finding new eyes peeking around stall corners or pausing near the paddocks, eager to catch a glimpse of the miracle horse and his mysterious owner. Dusty, once the butt of every joke, now drew stares and sidelong glances as Mark walked him along the stable row. The horse's coat glistened with health, his stride long and confident. He looked every bit a thoroughbred now, but some folks couldn't let go of old doubts. He must be hiding something, right? No way a broke old guy just waltzes in and turns a skeleton into a racehorse. The gossip seemed endless. Some of it was harmless, just the usual racetrack chatter, but some had sharper edges. Mark noticed how the conversations would die down when he approached. Sometimes he'd catch fragments. "Heard he's got family money, that's how." Or, "He's running some kind of hustle. You'll see." Sarah felt the shift, too. Where before she'd been invisible, now people noticed her, though not in the way she'd hoped. A pair of older girls from a big-time stable cornered her by the water trough one afternoon, sneers twisting their faces. "So you're working for Mark now, huh? Must be nice not to care if you ever win. Maybe you can teach us how to brush losers." Sarah clenched her fists, staring at the ground. Mark stepped in before things could get worse, his voice even, but his eyes hard as flint. "That's enough. If you want to help, you're welcome. If not, let us work." The girls scoffed, muttering as they walked away. Sarah tried to hide her embarrassment. Sometimes I wish they'd leave me alone." Mark shook his head. "You're part of this team. You stand tall no matter what they say. People talk when they're afraid of being left behind." The next morning, Sarah arrived early, shoulders squared. She found Mark already at work, polishing Dusty's bridle, his focus unbroken by the noise outside. She slipped into the routine, grateful for the safe space he offered. It wasn't long before Dusty poked his head out, ears pricked, looking for his two friends. Mark tossed Sarah an apple slice. "Want to give him breakfast?" She smiled, holding out her palm. Dusty took the treat delicately, chewing with contentment. The simple trust between them made the world outside fade for a moment. Meanwhile, the track's regulars kept their eyes on Dusty's stall. Some days Mark heard snide remarks. Other days, bettors eyed him with open suspicion, whispering about hidden agendas and secret pasts. One afternoon, a trainer named Vin, built like a linebacker, voice booming, cornered Mark by the feed shed. "Hey Mark, the boys and I got a pool going. Who are you, really? You must have trained somewhere big before this, right? No way you just show up and start winning with a reject." Mark just smiled, calm as always. "I'm just here for the horses." Vin laughed, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. "Yeah, sure. We'll see about that." Behind all the tension, something undeniable was happening. Dusty was changing day by day. The dullness in his coat was gone, replaced by a coppery shine that caught the sun. Where once he'd flinch at every loud sound, now he stood tall, meeting the eyes of passing strangers without fear. His muscles thickened, chest deepening, legs growing stronger from careful training and real food. Mark had spent his last winnings on premium oats and supplements, pouring every dime back into Dusty's care. The transformation became the talk of the track. Even the old-timers, who'd spent decades watching horses come and go, started to pay attention. "That's the same horse?" one asked, scratching his beard. "Looks like he's got fire in him now. Never seen a turnaround like it." Sarah basked in Dusty's progress. She took pride in the compliments Mark received, and even started standing up for herself when the other hands tried to push her around. "Yeah, I work for Mark. I'm learning a lot too. Maybe you should ask him for advice instead of making fun." The days blended together. Long hours, sweat and dust, endless small victories that nobody saw but meant everything to Mark and Sarah. They watched as Dusty's confidence grew, his fear of crowds fading with each careful morning walk, his trust in people slowly mending. Mark's gentle training wasn't flashy, but it was relentless. Patience, repetition, love. Where others demanded obedience through harshness, Mark coaxed courage and heart. One evening, as the sun slipped low and the last of the crowd wandered home, Mark lingered at the stall. Sarah joined him, leaning on the rail, watching Dusty munch his dinner. "Do you think it'll ever get easier?" she asked, voice soft. Mark nodded, his gaze steady. "It already has. We're proving them wrong, just by showing up. Give it time, Sarah. Some folks need to see 1,000 small miracles before they believe in one." For the first time, Sarah truly believed it too. Rumors would come and go. Jealousy and doubt would always find a way to stir the pot. But in the small world of their barn, a real transformation was taking root. One that no amount of gossip could undo. Dusty, Mark, and Sarah were becoming something bigger than the sum of their scars, and the rest of the racetrack, whether they liked it or not, had started to notice. A crisp autumn wind rattled the grandstands as race day approached, anticipation building in the air like static. The crowds at the California track were thicker now. Word had spread about the skinny brown horse and his ragged owner who had started turning heads. Bettors who once laughed now hovered near the paddock rail, searching for clues, hoping to catch some hint of magic or fraud. The bookies had quietly shifted Dusty's odds, no longer a 100-to-1 joke, but still an outsider, a curiosity at best. Mark kept to his routines, rising before dawn, working with Sarah to brush, feed, and walk Dusty. He watched the crowds multiply, felt the stares grow sharper, but kept his focus locked on the horse. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here for Dusty, and for the small, private promise he'd made the day he handed over his last crumpled bills at the auction. On the morning of the race, the air snapped with energy. The sun spilled gold across the stable roofs as Mark led Dusty out for the first big test since his transformation. Sarah trailed beside him, carrying the tack and stroking Dusty's neck. Even she could feel the shift. Nobody dared snicker as they passed. Instead, the silence was heavy, watchful, thick with expectation. At the paddock, Mark met Julio, the young jockey, and exchanged a quiet handshake. Julio's eyes sparkled with nerves. "He's ready, right, Mr. Davis?" Mark nodded, his voice low. "He's ready. Just trust him. Let him run his race." In the post-parade, Dusty shone like a copper penny in the sunlight, muscles rippling, stride loose and easy. People leaned over the rail, snapping photos, whispering to each other. A few of the regulars were already hedging their bets, some drawn by Dusty's growing legend, others betting out of spite, convinced the miracle would finally run out. When the horses loaded into the gate, the energy was electric. The bell clanged, gates snapped open, and for an instant Dusty lagged behind, boxed in by two much larger horses. The favorites lunged for the lead, their jockeys urging them hard, but Mark's eyes were on Dusty, watching, willing, knowing what the horse could do. Sarah gripped the fence, breath caught in her chest. For the first half of the race, Dusty hung near the back, biding his time. Some in the crowd began to murmur. "See, I told you, just a fluke last time. He's not cut out for—" But then, coming off the far turn, Julio gave Dusty his head, and the gelding surged. He darted wide around the pack, just as Mark had coached, finding clear running room on the outside rail, muscles bunched, hooves pounding. Dusty closed the gap with each stride, the crowd's skepticism turning to gasps of excitement. "He's moving! He's actually moving!" The leaders faltered, legs churning, but Dusty only accelerated. In the final 100 yards, he swept past them all, ears pinned, eyes fierce. The wire flashed by. Dusty first by a length. The grandstand erupted. Some cheered, some groaned. Others just stared, open-mouthed. Reporters hustled to the rail. Sarah leapt into the air, whooping, unable to contain her joy. Mark simply smiled, feeling a wave of quiet relief. He met Julio by the winner's circle, clasping his hand. "Good ride," Mark said. Julio grinned, still breathless. He did it all. Never felt a horse want it that bad. As Mark led Dusty toward the winner's circle, a group of reporters pushed forward, shoving mics and recorders in his face. "Mark, what's your secret? Where did you come from? How do you explain this turnaround?" Mark kept his answers simple, eyes on Dusty. "Hard work, patience. You treat a horse right, he'll give you his heart." But the questions kept coming, more pointed now. "Are you really just a broke old trainer? Or is there more to this story? Who's backing you?" Mark smiled, refusing to take the bait. "Just me and my team, that's all there is." The win changed everything. Over the next few weeks, Dusty raced again, and won. Each victory drew bigger crowds and louder chatter. Some people cheered, seeing hope for every underdog. Others grew suspicious, rumors swirling like autumn leaves. Theories flourished. Mark was secretly rich, or a disgraced trainer under a new name, or running a con with help from someone powerful behind the scenes. Mark ignored the noise, using his winnings not for himself, but for Dusty. He bought the best feed and vet care, mended the old truck just enough to keep it running, and quietly donated to the local youth riding program. A little envelope slipped to the director, no name, no fanfare. He told Sarah, "It's about giving back. None of us makes it alone." Sarah noticed how his quiet generosity began to ripple out. Some of the kids from the youth program showed up at the next race, shouting encouragement for Dusty. Other small-time owners, struggling with overlooked horses of their own, started asking Mark for advice, and he gave it freely. He never lorded his success over anyone. He just listened, shared what he knew, and kept showing up every morning before sunrise to do the real work. Meanwhile, the skepticism on the track hardened. Some rival owners watched Mark with envy, their friendly smiles hiding grudges. A few trainers whispered about finding ways to trip him up, convinced that nobody could be that lucky, that honest, or that good. Sarah saw the tension building and worried. "Are you scared, Mark? People are starting to talk." Mark just patted Dusty's nose, voice steady. "Let them talk. The only thing we can control is what we do, how we treat the horse, how we treat each other." At the next race, Dusty won again, this time against a field stacked with favorites. The cheers were louder, but so were the rumors. When the reporters pressed him harder, Mark simply tipped his hat and led Dusty away, the picture of quiet dignity. That night, as they finished mucking the stalls, Sarah asked, "Do you ever wish you'd kept your head down, stayed out of the spotlight?" Mark paused, looking out over the quiet track, the grandstands empty under the moon. "No. You gotta run your race, Sarah. Win or lose, you show people what's possible, and you help who you can along the way. That's what matters." Sarah nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. Dusty, once overlooked, now a champion, slept soundly, his dreams undisturbed by the noise outside. In the hush of the stable, Mark and Sarah knew they'd changed more than just one horse's fate. They'd shown everyone what heart, hope, and hard work could do. And they were just getting started. Rain hammered the metal rooftops of the racetrack barns, turning the dirt outside to slick, heavy mud. In the gloom of that morning, there was a sense that something had shifted, a tension that ran deeper than the weather. Mark could feel it as soon as he arrived, a prickle between his shoulders as he walked Dusty down the row. The usual whispers were gone, replaced by watchful silence, the kind that settles before a storm. Sarah hurried to meet him, breath clouding in the chilly air. "They're saying today's stakes are the biggest yet. Everyone's watching, Mark. Even the big owners. Some of them never come out for the little races, but now they're here, scoping us out." Mark nodded, tightening the cinch on Dusty's saddle. He could sense the nervous energy in his horse, the way Dusty tossed his head and stomped restlessly, more alert than ever. "Let them watch. We stick to what we know. We run our race." But as post time neared, Mark picked up on the new edge in the air. Rival owners gathered at the corners, their voices low, heads bent together. Julio, the jockey, stopped by Dusty's stall, helmet in hand, eyes wide. "Mr. Davis, they're planning something. I heard Vin and a couple of his buddies. They want to box us in, shut us out of the run. They think if they keep us off the rail, Dusty won't have a chance." Mark's face hardened. "Thanks, Julio. We'll adjust." He led Dusty out into the muddy paddock, rainwater streaming off the brims of hats, soaking the crowd. The other horses were already circling, their trainers giving last-minute instructions. When Dusty appeared, a few owners shot him nasty looks, one or two even smirking with a confidence that was too practiced. Sarah squeezed Mark's arm. "Be careful. They're jealous. They think you made them look foolish." Mark knelt by Dusty's head, whispering into the horse's ear. "You're gonna hear a lot of noise, boy. You just listen for my voice and for Julio. Don't let them push you around." At the starting gate, Dusty was forced between two of the biggest rivals, Vin's powerful gray on one side, a burly chestnut on the other. Julio climbed into the saddle, jaw set, hands tight on the reins. The bell clanged. The gates burst open, and in a flash, Dusty was trapped. Both rival horses swung in, boxing Dusty against the rail. Mud flew, hooves thundered, jockeys yelling and cursing. Julio tried to angle Dusty out, but every gap closed fast. For nearly half the race, Dusty struggled to break free, hemmed in, his stride shortened by the wall of muscle on either side. In the stands, Sarah's heart pounded. They're cheating. Can't the stewards see? Mark watched with steely calm, his lips moving as he silently counted the beats. He'd seen tactics like this before, dirty tricks that could shake a horse's nerve or exhaust him before the finish. But he'd also trained for it. As the field hit the far turn, Julio remembered Mark's advice. If they box you in, don't fight them head on. Let Dusty drop back, wait for the opening, then go wide. Julio gave a gentle pull, letting Dusty drop a length off the pace. The rivals pressed forward, momentarily forgetting about the horse behind them. That was the break. Julio shifted Dusty outside, mud splattering his silks, and the gelding surged forward, legs churning, finding open ground at last. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, disbelief. Dusty swept wide around the pack, picking up speed with every stride. The favorites were already tiring, their jockeys whipping desperately. Dusty, legs caked in mud but heart unbroken, exploded down the final stretch. Julio rode him hands and heels, not needing the whip, just giving him the chance to run. Dusty passed the leaders one by one, ears flat, nostrils flaring. The finish line loomed ahead, banners flapping in the storm wind. In those last seconds, the track seemed to hold its breath. Mud flew, thunder rumbled. Vin's gray fought to hold the lead, but Dusty would not be denied. With one final burst, he surged ahead, crossing the finish just a nose in front. The grandstand exploded. Boos from the rival camps, wild cheers from Dusty's new fans. Mark let out a slow breath, fists unclenching. Sarah nearly wept with relief, clutching the rail so hard her knuckles went white. Julio swung down in the winner's circle, covered in filth but grinning from ear to ear. He did it. He didn't back down for a second. Reporters swarmed the paddock, peppering Mark with questions. How did you know Dusty could pull through? Did you anticipate the sabotage? Mark's smile was weary, but genuine. You train for heart, not just for speed. Heart gets you through when things get ugly, and Dusty's got the biggest heart on this track. Behind the scenes, the rival trainers fumed, their faces stormy. Some filed complaints with the stewards, but the officials found nothing they could penalize. No clear violation, just aggressive riding. Still, the tension only grew. Back in the barn, as Mark checked Dusty's legs for cuts, Sarah vented her anger. They tried to take you out, on purpose. How do you stay so calm, Mark? Mark shrugged, wiping the sweat from Dusty's flank. You let anger make your decisions. You start making mistakes. We stay humble. We keep working. People who cheat never really win. They just delay losing. Sarah nodded, soaking in the lesson. Maybe that's why they're scared of us. Word of Dusty's triumph spread even farther after that day. He'd become more than an underdog. He was a symbol of resilience, the horse that wouldn't quit even when the odds and other people tried to crush him. Mark's reputation grew with Dusty's legend, but he refused to let it change him. He was still the first in the barn each morning, still the last to leave, always with a gentle word for his horse and for the people who had stuck by him. As night fell, Mark lingered in the quiet, watching Dusty doze in his stall. Sarah came to stand beside him, tired but smiling. We did it again, Mark, even when they tried to break us. Mark nodded, a rare pride in his voice. We did. But tomorrow we start all over. Every race is a new chance and a new test. The storm outside eased, leaving the world washed clean. Inside that humble barn, Mark, Sarah, and Dusty had proved that grit and a little faith could weather any storm the world could throw at them. The sun returned to California, banishing the rain and drawing crowds back to the racetrack in greater numbers than ever before. By now, even the most jaded regulars had heard of Dusty, the junkyard racehorse who kept beating the odds. Fans and reporters pressed against the rails for a glimpse of the scrappy brown gelding and his quiet, stubborn owner. People swapped rumors between races, each story more outlandish than the last. On the morning of the next race, Mark found himself followed everywhere he went. Someone always seemed to be watching, jotting in a notebook or snapping a photo on their phone. Sarah tried to keep the space around Dusty clear, but the attention was relentless. Even Julio was feeling it. "You ever seen anything like this, Mr. Davis?" he asked, tightening Dusty's girth before the race. Mark just shook his head. "Fame is a funny thing. Here one day, gone the next. We focus on the work, not the noise." But as race time neared, the noise got harder to ignore. In the press tent, the mood was feverish. Two reporters from rival newspapers bickered over who had the better scoop on the mysterious Mark Davis. Someone whispered about an old photo, grainy, years old, circulating in a private group chat. Another reporter boasted, "Wait until they see what I've got." Sarah overheard them, anxiety tightening her face. She found Mark by the stables, worry in her voice. "They're digging, Mark. I think they're close to something. You okay?" Mark's eyes were steady, his jaw set. "They'll say what they want. All we can do is tell the truth when the time comes." That day's race played out like a script written by fate. Dusty, battered but proud, broke well from the gate and settled just behind the leaders. The crowd cheered every stride. Julio waited, then made his move. Dusty surged ahead, took the lead, and never looked back, finishing first by 2 lengths. The stands erupted, but there was a different energy in the air, a sense that the victory meant more than a purse or a trophy. As Mark led Dusty toward the winner's circle, the usual scrum of reporters surged forward. But this time the crowd parted to make way for a man in a blue blazer, press badge gleaming on his chest. He carried a folder thick with documents and photographs. "Mark Davis!" the man called out, voice ringing above the din. Or should I say Marcus DeLuca, the former Derby-winning trainer who vanished after blowing the whistle on race fixing 10 years ago in Kentucky. A hush fell over the racetrack. Gasps rippled through the stands. Even Dusty seemed to sense the tension, tossing his head and stamping nervously. The reporter pressed in, eyes blazing. "Is it true? Why did you hide your identity? Are you here to embarrass the industry, or just cash in on your old reputation?" Mark stood tall, letting the words wash over him. He took a slow breath, looking first to Sarah, then to Julio, then to the faces in the crowd. Some shocked, some angry, some just curious. He spoke clearly, no anger, no shame. "My name is Mark Davis now. But yes, I was once Marcus DeLuca. I left racing because I couldn't stomach what the sport had become. Fixing, cheating, all about money and not about the horse. I lost everything standing up for what I believed in, and I walked away." The reporter fired back. "So you lied to everyone? How can we trust you now?" Murmurs rippled through the grandstand. Some called out for Mark to be disqualified. Others defended him, shouting back at the reporters. Sarah's hands shook as she stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. "He never lied about what mattered. He worked harder than anyone. He taught us all how to treat these horses right." Julio joined her, his arm around Dusty's neck. "This man saved a horse everyone else gave up on. That's all that should matter." But the press was relentless. "Are you saying you never used your old connections? That you didn't rig anything this time?" Mark's face was weary, but his eyes burned with sincerity. "I kept my head down so I could prove, to myself, to everyone, that you don't need money or a big name to make a difference. Dusty wasn't supposed to win. I wasn't supposed to matter. But heart, patience, and hard work, they still count for something. Or at least, they should." The crowd divided sharply. Some shouted, "He's a cheat! Kick him out!" Others roared, "Let him race! He's earned it!" A commotion broke out near the steward's booth as rival owners tried to sway the officials. Reporters swarmed, snapping photos and recording every word. Sarah grabbed Mark's hand, her eyes pleading. "Don't let them push you out, Mark. You did everything right." Julio faced the crowd, voice clear. "You can look at the horse and see for yourself. He was nothing until Mark believed in him." A trembling silence fell over the track as everyone waited to see what the officials would do. Mark stepped forward, addressing the entire grandstand. "I never asked for fame. I didn't want the spotlight. I just wanted one more chance to do things the right way. If that's a crime, then I'll leave. But I hope, deep down, that racing can be about the horses again. That it can be about giving people and animals a second chance." There was something in his words that silenced even his critics for a moment. The crowd felt the sincerity, the fatigue, and the hope that lingered beneath his confession. As the sun set over the racetrack, the outcome was uncertain. The stewards retreated to debate. Rivals whispered furiously. Reporters huddled over their stories. But Sarah stood by Mark's side, unwavering, and Dusty nuzzled his shoulder, as if to say, "No matter what happens, you kept your promise." The night was thick with questions and doubts, but Mark knew he had finally told the truth, and for the first time in years, he felt free. Whatever tomorrow held, he would face it with his head held high. The steward's office sat above the racetrack like a judge's balcony, windows gleaming with the last streaks of sunset. Inside, the air was tight with tension. Owners, trainers, reporters, and fans pressed shoulder to shoulder, everyone straining to hear what would happen to Mark and Dusty after the bombshell revelation. Mark sat quietly on a folding chair, hands clasped, his hat resting on his knee. Beside him, Sarah fidgeted with a frayed piece of string, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. On the other side of the room, rival trainers huddled in tense clusters, voices sharp and hushed. "He lied. You can't trust him. He made a fool of all of us." But what if he really did everything fair and square? He's a snake, always was. Just wants the spotlight back. The racetrack committee, a panel of 7 stern-faced men and women in tailored jackets, sat at a long table. Their expressions ranged from icy skepticism to guarded curiosity. The chairwoman, Mrs. Ellison, tapped a pen against her notepad, waiting for the noise to die down. "Let's keep this civil. Mr. Davis, you've been accused of hiding your identity and bringing the sport into disrepute. You may speak for yourself." Mark rose, meeting the room's gaze without flinching. "I didn't hide to cheat. I hid because I wanted to race the right way. No sponsors, no backroom deals, no shortcuts. Just me, a good horse, and honest work. If I failed, I wanted it to be because I wasn't good enough, not because I didn't play dirty." A few snorts came from the rivals. "Easy to say now." Mrs. Ellison raised her hand. "Did you receive help from anyone inside the industry? Did you benefit from your past connections?" "No, ma'am," Mark said, steady. "Not a cent, not a favor. Every dollar I spent was mine, or earned from the purse. I bought Dusty when no one else would touch him. Every improvement you saw was sweat, patience, and trust. Nothing more. There was a pause as the committee exchanged looks. Then the accusations began in earnest. Vin, the big trainer, pounded a fist on the table. He fooled us. He had every advantage. How do we know he didn't cut corners? Use inside info. Mark shook his head, but before he could answer, Sarah shot to her feet. Her voice shook at first, but grew steadier with each word. He never cheated. I saw it all, every morning, every night. He taught me how to train with kindness, not whips or threats. He listened to the horses. He believed in me, even when everyone else said I was worthless. If you ban him, you're telling every kid like me they don't have a shot unless they're born rich or famous. The room stilled. The committee looked from Sarah to Mark, then back again. Mrs. Ellison's voice softened. Why did you help her, Mr. Davis? Mark looked at Sarah with quiet pride. Because she needed someone to believe in her. Same as Dusty. Same as me. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant thump of hooves from the evening exercise ring. Then another committee member, Mr. Patel, cleared his throat. We've had trouble with corruption in this sport. People are tired of cheaters, of money deciding who wins and who gets left behind. But what you did, you made us all feel something again. Even the ones who didn't want to. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some owners muttered angrily, but others nodded, grudging respect in their eyes. The mood was shifting, a slow realization that maybe, just maybe, Dusty's victories had been more than a fluke. Mrs. Ellison leaned forward. Sarah, what did you learn from Mr. Davis? Sarah stood straighter. I learned that everyone has a chance if someone's willing to take a risk on them. I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always make you popular, but it makes you proud. And I learned that second chances matter. For horses, and people too. The committee conferred in low voices, papers shuffled, phones buzzed. Outside, the crowd pressed against the windows, waiting for a verdict. At last, Mrs. Ellison looked up. Mr. Davis, you will not be banned. You will continue to race under scrutiny, but not as a pariah. Dusty's story is bigger than your past. He's become a symbol of what racing should be. Honest, tough, and full of hope. The sport needs that now more than ever. A sigh swept through the room, relief mixing with disbelief. Mark sat back, shoulders sagging. Sarah grabbed his hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. Julio appeared at the door, a wide grin on his face. You did it, Mark! We get to keep running! The rival trainers filed out, some muttering curses, others pausing to shake Mark's hand with awkward respect. One of them, a woman named Marisol, caught his eye. I fought against you every step, but you made us remember why we started in this business. Don't waste this second chance. That night, the barn was alive with quiet celebration. The youth-riding kids stopped by with homemade banners and cupcakes. Julio danced Dusty around the paddock, whooping with joy. Even the oldest grooms, those who'd seen every scam and heartbreak the sport could offer, came by to clap Mark on the back. Sarah found Mark sitting by Dusty's stall, gazing out at the moonlit track. You all right? He nodded, a deep peace settling in his chest. I've lost a lot in this life, Sarah. But today, we won something I never expected. Respect, and a real shot to make things better. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You changed my life, Mark, just by believing. Mark smiled, his voice soft. You did the same for me, kid. In the cool darkness, a new sense of purpose blossomed. The story of Mark, Sarah, and Dusty wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about redemption, about showing an entire world that second chances were worth fighting for. And as the wind carried the sounds of distant laughter and the soft nickers of contented horses, Mark knew the real race had only just begun. The news of Mark's redemption and the committee's decision spread like wildfire through the racetrack community and far beyond. Within days, Dusty's name was on every racing blog, and Mark's old, battered pickup was as famous as any thoroughbred in California. The story of the poor man and the rescued horse who refused to quit had become something larger than a single win or a lucky break. It was hope in motion, contagious and impossible to ignore. Mark hardly had time to notice the change at first. He was still up before dawn, boots scraping along the barn aisle, mixing feed and whistling softly to Dusty. But now, instead of wary glances and muttered rumors, people greeted him with nods, handshakes, even the occasional awkward apology from those who doubted him. The barn had become a gathering place, not just for the team, but for anyone hungry for a little bit of that hard-won magic. One Saturday morning, Mark was surprised to see a small crowd waiting by Dusty's stall. Teenagers from the youth riding program, a couple of young owners struggling with their first horses, and even a few older trainers, their pride tucked away for the moment. Mark looked at Sarah and smiled, recognizing the same mixture of nerves and hope he'd once carried in his own heart. Sarah nudged him. "Go on, Mark. Tell them how you did it." He hesitated, never one for speeches, but when he met their eyes, he saw the same uncertainty that had haunted him through so many hard years. He took a deep breath and began. "It starts with respect. For the horse, for the people around you, and for the work. Dusty didn't need to be yelled at or scared straight. He needed patience. 10,000 small kindnesses, every day, until he believed in himself again. There's no trick. Just work and heart." He showed them his training routines, how to read a horse's mood from the flick of an ear, how to spot when a horse was tired instead of lazy, how to use a soft hand even with the most stubborn animal. He let Sarah lead a group of kids through the stalls, demonstrating how Dusty responded to gentle encouragement, how trust was built in quiet, daily moments, not in grand gestures or harsh orders. Word traveled quickly. By the next week, other owners started stopping by, not just to watch, but to ask for help. Some brought horses that had lost their spark, old claimers, anxious rescues, even a filly rumored to be untrainable. Mark took them all seriously, offering advice, sharing stories, and always reminding them, every horse has something worth saving. Sometimes you just have to dig for it. Sarah flourished in this new environment. She took charge of mentoring younger kids from the riding program, teaching them everything Mark had shown her. Her confidence became infectious. The barn rang with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the tension and isolation that had once been the norm. Even a few former rivals came around, grudgingly at first, then with genuine curiosity. Vin, the big trainer who'd once tried to sabotage Dusty, sent his assistant over with questions about hoof care and stress management. Mark answered them all without resentment. Julio, too, became a fixture in this new community. He spent afternoons demonstrating riding techniques for the youth program, telling stories about the races, and always giving credit to Mark and Dusty for what he called the best lesson I ever learned: never count anyone out. Mark's winnings weren't vast, but he made them count. Instead of pocketing the purse, he invested in the people around him. He bought new equipment for the youth riding program, paid the entry fees for young trainers with promise but no connections, and even started a small scholarship fund for those dreaming of a future in horsemanship. "There's no shortage of talent here," he said at the program's launch. "Just a shortage of chances. Let's fix that." The racetrack, once a place of rivalry and suspicion, began to shift. Trainers who'd barely spoken outside of competition now shared meals in the break room, swapping advice and stories. Horses that had been passed from owner to owner forgotten and neglected, found themselves with advocates who saw possibility instead of failure. Dusty became the track's unofficial mascot, the horse of second chances. Local newspapers ran features on him and Sarah, and parents from all over the county brought their kids to see the famous gelding who proved that miracles could be made, not bought. One afternoon, as the barn bustled with activity, Mark caught Sarah watching the crowd, her face lit with pride. "Did you ever think we'd see this, Mark? That one horse could change so much?" He smiled, eyes soft. "I hoped. I didn't know. But every good thing starts small. Sometimes all it takes is someone to believe. Then you pass it on." She grinned, watching a group of kids stroke Dusty's nose. "Feels like we started something big." "You did," Mark replied. "You and Dusty, and every person who didn't quit." The impact stretched even beyond the racetrack. Mark was invited to speak at local schools, sharing Dusty's story and talking about perseverance and kindness. He always brought Sarah along, letting her tell the story in her own words. The message was clear. No one is ever just what the world sees on the surface. With hard work, faith, and a little help, anyone can become something more. As the season wore on, Dusty continued to race. Not always winning, but always running with heart, always finishing strong. People cheered for him not because he was a champion, but because he stood for something bigger. Mark watched the crowds swell at every meet, saw parents pointing out Dusty to their children, telling them that real victory wasn't just about being first. It was about not giving up, about giving others a shot. That fall, Mark established a formal scholarship fund for young trainers and partnered with the local horse rescue, offering his time and knowledge to those just starting out. He saw pieces of himself in every kid who showed up, nervous, uncertain, but stubborn enough to dream. In the quiet of the barn after a long day, Mark sometimes reflected on how much had changed. He'd come to the track hoping to prove something to himself. Instead, he'd proved that one person's belief, given freely, shared openly, could change everything. Dusty snorted softly in his stall, as if in agreement. Mark smiled, running a gentle hand along the horse's scarred flank. "We did good, buddy. We did real good." And the work, the real work, was just beginning. The end of the racing season arrived with a cold, golden sun and the scent of change drifting through the California air. The stands were packed for the championship meet, a day when champions were crowned and dreams, new or old, were measured against the finish line. But this year, there was a feeling in the air that things were different. Kids wore T-shirts with Dusty's face on them. Older trainers who once scoffed now brought their families to the rail. Reporters buzzed, but there was less talk of scandal, more talk of hope. Mark's barn was busy from first light. Sarah ran her checklist with the confidence of someone who had earned her place. The scholarship kids arrived early, eager to help, their laughter mixing with the calls of vendors and the thud of hoofbeats in the paddock. Even the old-timers paused at Dusty's stall, wishing Mark luck, some even offering to walk the gelding to the ring themselves. The race itself wasn't the biggest of Dusty's career, but it mattered most. Not for the purse or the trophy, but for what it meant. A full circle moment for every underdog, every doubter, every kid who had ever believed they were running alone. As the crowd found their seats, Mark stood quietly by Dusty's side, his hand steady on the horse's neck. Sarah and Julio flanked him, sharing a long look, a silent gratitude passing between them for everything this journey had become. The tension was there, but it felt clean, electric, as if everyone knew this was less about who finished first and more about the story itself. Julio, adjusting his silks, caught Mark's eye. "You nervous?" Mark smiled, a little wistful. "Not for the race. I'm just grateful we made it here. No matter what happens out there, we already won something bigger." Dusty stepped onto the track to a wave of applause. Children waved homemade signs, parents pointed, older fans shouted encouragement. As the field circled the post, Sarah squeezed Mark's shoulder. "He's ready, we all are." The starting bell rang out. Gates flew open. For a moment, all was thunder, hooves and hearts pounding in unison. Dusty fell into stride, not the fastest but running free, ears pricked, every muscle alive. The other horses pressed hard, but Julio rode with calm hands, letting Dusty find his rhythm. The final turn came fast, horses bunched tight, elbows and shoulders jostling for space. For an instant, Dusty was boxed in, but just as he had so many times before, he slipped through a narrow opening, found his line, and sprinted for home. The stands rose to their feet as Dusty surged forward, closing on the leaders with every stride. He finished a close second, just a nose behind the favorite. But as the horses pulled up and the jockeys doffed their helmets, a strange thing happened. The cheers grew louder, not for the winner, but for Dusty. The crowd chanted his name, a roar of pure joy, celebrating not just a race, but a spirit. Dusty trotted back to Mark, sweat-soaked but proud, ears flicking at every cry of encouragement. After the race, the crowd gathered for the season's closing ceremony. Mark, dusty boots and all, was called up to the microphone by Mrs. Ellison, the committee chair. Her voice carried both warmth and gravity. "Before we crown this year's champions, we'd like to recognize the horse and the team who reminded us what this sport is supposed to be about." A hush fell as Mark stepped up, Sarah and Julio beside him, with Dusty looking out over the rail. Mark cleared his throat, scanning the crowd. The faces young and old, hopeful and weary, united for a moment by what had happened over these long, unlikely months. He began softly, but his voice grew with conviction. "When I first came here, I didn't have much, certainly not the money or the fancy connections. All I had was a tired old horse and a little hope left in my heart. I was just trying to prove something to myself. After a lot of years of running from who I was," he looked at Sarah, at Julio, at Dusty. "But I learned something out here. You can spend your whole life chasing what's in your pocket. Money, trophies, the approval of people who might never understand you. Or you can chase something better, what's in your heart, and the chance to lift somebody else up when nobody else will." He paused, letting the words settle. "There are always going to be people who doubt you, who think you don't belong. But sometimes you have to hide what you have just to show what you really believe in. Dusty wasn't supposed to matter, neither was I. But a second chance, given with kindness, can change everything. I hope you all remember that. The real race isn't just to the finish line. It's lifting each other up, giving every horse and every person a chance to run free." He thanked Sarah for her courage and her heart. He thanked Julio for his faith in an unlikely team. He thanked the committee for letting second chances mean something again. And he thanked the crowd, kids, parents, old rivals, for believing that grit, kindness, and a little faith could still change the game. Mrs. Ellison stepped forward, voice wavering just a bit. "Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dusty. You reminded us why we love this sport." The ceremony continued, but the real celebration was down at the barns. Old foes approached Mark with new respect. The scholarship kids hugged Sarah and Dusty, promising to keep working, to keep believing. Reporters snapped photos, but this time the story was clear. A legacy had been built, not from wealth or scandal, but from second chances and stubborn hope. As twilight fell, Mark and Sarah walked Dusty through the quiet barn one last time. The track was empty, shadows long, but the place felt alive with memories. Every early morning, every setback, every victory that mattered. Sarah stopped at the gate, looking back. What do we do now, Mark? What's next? Mark smiled, a little wistful but content. We keep going. We help the next kid who needs it. We find the next Dusty. The world's always going to need another second chance. He pulled the barn door closed, Dusty snorting softly, Sarah by his side. That night, as the California stars came out and the wind whispered across the empty grandstand, Mark Davis, once Marcus DeLuca, now simply a man who believed, sat with his friends and looked toward the future. He knew the story would outlast them all. In every barn, every dusty corner of every track, there'd be another horse, another lost soul, waiting for someone to see their worth. And thanks to one tired horse, one stubborn girl, and a man who refused to quit, the whole world now knew. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that lift everybody up, not just the winner.